In JavaScript, a function is just an object, but a special object that can have a block of code that gets executed when you call it. And since functions are just objects, functions also have properties and methods that you can use. Here in the MDN, the function properties and methods are listed here. So let's explore some of them. Let's see function.length. This property has the number of arguments expected by the function. For example, I will create a basic function with 2 parameters. Let's console log the function.length. Here it says that our function is expecting 2 arguments. Let's add a new parameter. And now it returns 3. You may need this property. Let's move to function methods. I will click on apply. This apply method allows you to call a method on an object and give it the value of this. So I will create 2 objects. The first one is an employee. Then the second one is a student. The employee has 3 properties: the name, the email, and its job, and a method display method, which basically logs the employee name and the employee email. Then the student has 2 properties: the name and the email. So let's call the display method on the employee object. And now we have the name of the email of the employee. Now what if you want to use the display method but you want this to be pointing to the student object? Well, with the apply method this can be achieved. We use the employee object, then we look for the display method, and on it we have the apply method, and change the context of this. I will give it the student object. Now here, this method, when it is being called, the this keyword will not point to the employee object. It will point to the student object. That's why we have the name and the email of the student displayed here. I know, this may be confusing at first, but trust me, with a little bit of practice, it will be very easy. Now, if your method accepts arguments, let's change this method. With the apply method, you can still pass arguments to the method on which you are using. The apply method, the second argument for the apply method, will be considered as argument for the method, and it must be an array. And now, when we add one item to the array, this item will be the first parameter. If our method has 2 parameters and you want to call the method with a second parameter, you just add a second item to this array, and this item will be the argument to this parameter. You also have another method called the call method. This method works just like the apply method. It lets you change the value of this within a function. But for arguments, you don't use an array. You just separate arguments with comma. And great, it is working. So to the apply method, you give it an array for the arguments, and to the call method, you give it a list of arguments separated by a comma. Now let's move to the bind method. The bind method is a little bit different. This method creates a new function that, when called, has this keyword set to the provided value. So here let's use the bind method on the same 2 objects. I will create a variable that will hold the result of the bind method used on the display method of the employee, and I will give it the value of student as this. Now when I go to the browser, I can see that bind does not call the function immediately like call and apply methods. It just returns a new function with a new value of this. In our case, this keyword is pointing to the student, and now we just have to call it and give it arguments. Great, it is working.